Okay, folks, here we go. It is time for Stud Stories. We've got the Tennessee Stud. All we need is the story. And now here he is, Ron Fuller. Hey, Stud, what is the story?
Well, my man, we are going to be doing another NWA World Champion, and we're going to be doing one today on a pretty, a totally different type of human being, as a matter of fact, in a way. We're going to be talking about today Giant Baba. So, we're going to Japan for this one. And we're going to talk about, as I said, another NWA World Champion that I wrestled in my 18-year career. And this one obviously is from Japan. And he was known as the Giant Baba. He's no longer with us, but he was known in his career as the Giant Baba. He was the owner of All Japan Pro Wrestling, along with his American partners, Dory Funk Jr. and Terry Funk, who were involved with him as well for many of those years that he ran that company. And that company ran matches from basically about 1973 until the year 2000. For 27 years, they ran wrestling in Japan, Baba and the Funks. So I wrestled for All Japan Pro Wrestling in November and December of 1983. I wrestled in their annual tag team tournament that they had every year, just in early December, maybe late November into early December. It was about a 3-week tour. This one was, and then it lasted about 3 weeks, and then it usually ended a couple weeks before Christmas. And my partner for this tag team tournament was Barry Windham, who was a great wrestler, a hell of a partner, and a great little star man back in those days in '83. So I got invited by Dory Jr. and Terry Funk, the only two brothers, obviously, in wrestling history to both be NWA World Champions.
Yeah.
And we've done something on both of those two already at this point.
Yep.
And I'd been invited over there many times by Baba. Shoei Baba. His first name was Shoei.
Mm-hmm.
And Giant Baba, as he was known in Japan, he's the owner, obviously, of All Japan Pro Wrestling. And Baba and I had become friends during the years of the NWA meetings in Las Vegas, because he was basically a member around 1974. And that's when I became a member with Southeastern out of Knoxville in 1974. So we had been we were real friends, saw each other every year at NWA meetings in Las Vegas in the summertime. And I'd always kind of wanted to go to Japan. And when I got the call from the Funk Brothers in the fall of 1983, I decided maybe, after about 13 years in the sport at that point, it's time I go to Japan. And then, oddly enough, my brother, man, he never wanted to go anywhere. When I told him in 1983 I was going to Japan for a tour, he was like, "Are you nuts, Ron? What is that all about?"
Okay.
So, and then probably, after going and after spending the time, I realized that, maybe there's more to that than I thought, because, pretty cold over there in Japan in the wintertime.
Okay.
I can tell you that for sure. So after 13 years in the sport, I decided to make the trip. And heck, I'd been to Australia twice, so I figured, heck, I need to go to Japan, man. So let me start this thing out, Dave, by kind of describing Baba, if I can.
Right. Okay, good luck.
Yeah, he's not a real normal type of person, So he's about my height, at least my height. And, he might have been even a couple of inches taller than me. He might have been 7 feet.
Wow.
And he was very thin, especially in the body. He had this very strange body. I mean, no big broad chest like American men, very thin in the chest, thin in the stomach area. And but he had this extremely long and relatively wide head. He had a big head. I guess there's no way around describing it that. No other way I can think of to describe it as that. His body was just basically, when you looked at him, he's pretty strange and awkward looking guy. But they really obviously that shape and size, especially in Japan, man, he stuck out like a sore thumb. I can tell you that, man.
I
Every
bet.
time you travel with him or went anywhere with him, geez, everybody in that country knew him. He's probably the tallest Japanese in the history of the country, for one thing.
Right.
Nobody was taller than he was. None that I ever saw, anyway.
Right.
And then he was recognized, like I said, everywhere he went. And he was married to one of the most famous actresses in all of Japan. And she was just the opposite of him. She was barely 4 feet tall, and then she probably weighed less than 100 pounds.
Wow. Okay.
Can you imagine a couple like that, Dave? What they look like walking together?
Now, there is quite the contrast right there. Absolutely. Wow. That's incredible. Okay. 7 feet and 4 feet. Okay. Wow. Yeah. All right. So here's the thing. I didn't know if this was just going to be about Giant Baba because he's a big man and maybe you wrestled him before, but I didn't realize he was a former NWA world champion. So how and when did that happen? I mean, as I said, he's had a fascinating life in and of itself, but then he's an NWA world champion. What's up with that?
Well, it happened twice over a period of 5 years between 1974 and 1979, and it happened for a couple of reasons. There were two major wrestling companies in Japan for most of that almost 30 years that Baba's company, All Japan Pro Wrestling, existed. The other company was run by a wrestler named Antonio Inoki, who ran the other famous Japanese company called New Japan Wrestling. Now, his company was most famous for this huge worldwide event that he concocted the concept and the idea with Muhammad Ali in which they had a boxer against a wrestler in Japan, and it was Inoki against Muhammad Ali. One of the rare times, but they'd had them before, but they were one of the rare times that they put a boxer and a wrestler together.
Wow.
So, so the NWA organization was kind of hit with a bit of the dilemma because Baba was a member of the National Wrestling Alliance. Mm-hmm. All Japan Pro Wrestling was a member of the NWA, and along came Antonio Inoki that wanted to become a member as well with New Japan Wrestling. So that was really tough. I remember that as being the most controversial NWA meetings ever because these two Japanese organizations both wanted to become members of the National Wrestling Alliance, and both then would have the same world champion. And, it wasn't going to work. It's basically what it amounted to.
And they're competing organizations in Japan.
Right. They're competing against each other.
Right.
And already Baba gets the NWA world champion. And obviously Inoki says, well, why can't we get the NWA world champion as well? And we can be recognized as well. And wow, that was a very contentious NWA meeting, man. I mean, I never saw such venom throughout that usually 3 or 4 day meeting that's pretty friendly. Turned out to be kind of a war, man, over who's deciding who was going to actually become the member and stay the member. And it turned out to be Baba. So the NWA obviously decided to accept Baba in this battle to find out which of the two companies were going to be supported by the NWA. So in order for the NWA to show its support and its unqualified support for the NWA member of New Japan, All Japan Pro Wrestling, with Baba's company, what they did is they decided that they needed to make a couple of swaps because the world champion was going over there probably 5, 6, sometimes 7 times a year to Japan to wrestle, usually for a week, sometimes 2 weeks, sometimes even longer. But so they ended over there. We need to maybe swap the belt with someone over there, one of the Japanese counterparts. Obviously, Baba would be the guy because he's obviously the biggest and he owns the company as well. And so they thought that that might be a good idea. So during Jack Briscoe's reign, he was the first to go over there and do one of these that I call these short swaps of the NWA World Belt, and the first one was done in 1974. So he lost the NWA World Title on December 2nd, 1974, to Giant Baba in Kagoshima, Japan, and then he regained the belt 7 days later on December 9th, 1974, in Toyohashi, Japan, just before he left the country. So then it was done again 5 years later by Harley Race. And Harley lost the title on October the 1st, 1979, in Nagoya, Japan, to Giant Baba. And then he won the belt back on November 7th, 1979, in Amagasaki. I think that's pretty close, as close as I can get, man.
Yeah, okay, good job.
So, so a couple of times they did this in the 74. They did it again in 79. They did these short swaps. We're going to be talking about others of these as we go, as this goes by, And I wasn't in favor of these short swaps of the belt. So once they started talking about these in NWA meetings, this was a pretty controversial subject too, because a lot of guys didn't think that it did what it should for the title and for being champion. So the powers that were in charge at the time, though, they obviously got to make the decisions, and they decided that this needed to be done. And it's going to happen again in another one of these 11 NWA champions that I'm going to wrestle in my career. We're going to be talking about this guy, the next guy, pretty soon, about his career.
All right. So, but what do you remember most about Giant Baba and that Japan trip, Ron? What stands out?
Well, off the top of my head, two things in particular. The only match that I had with him was in Fukuyama, Japan, on December 5th, 1983. And I remember when we got in the ring and I went to shake hands with him, how tall he was. And it didn't take me long once the bell rang to realize how uncoordinated he was. And then there was a third thing, I guess, that really stuck with me, man, is how horribly cold it was in the building that night. So not many buildings in Japan were heated in the winter, and not many of them were cooled in the summer, especially back in 1983.
Right.
So you froze, man. When you went in the dressing room and you sat there and waited to go to the ring, you just sat there and froze. Guys would bring these big jackets, and you had to be prepared, man, for Japan wrestling, because you sat in the dressing room and you froze. And then when you took your stuff off and you went to the ring, you can imagine how you'd freeze in the ring. And it was worse being in tag matches because you had to stand on the outside of the ring, and when you weren't in the ring, you would beg to get tagged. I can remember going, Barry, I gotta get in there, man. You gotta tag me. I'm freezing. So at least when you got tagged, you had the opportunity to get in there and move around a little bit, get your blood running,
warm up a little.
Yeah, it was just horrible, man.
That's
it was
crazy.
Absolutely horrible. And it made me think about my brother's comment when he said, "Are you nuts, Ron?
Yeah.
You want to go to Japan?" So, I thought about that quite a few times in that 3 weeks I was over there for this tour about Rob. Hot dang, Rob, I think you're right. I don't know what the hell I'm doing up there. So, in my match with him, though, I remember it was not a long match. It was probably about 7 minutes, 6 or 7 minutes long. And I almost froze to death during it. I mean, it was just like you could not get warm. No matter what you tried to do, you weren't going to be able to get warm.
God, wow.
And then you can imagine you go out there in wrestling tights, you don't go out there and I wish I'd have gone over there like something like the Flame or the Assassin used to wear, man. One of those total body suits. And,
yeah.
That would have probably been a better deal.
Something around those very long legs, right?
Oh gosh,
Yeah.
man! I mean, it's there's just too much body there to with
Yeah.
nothing on it, man. And wow, you just be goosebumps all the time in the ring. So this match I had with him was about 6 or 7 minutes, and the other memorable thing I can remember about Baba was a dinner that we had in Kobe, Japan,
Huh.
with Baba and his wife. Dory Jr. was at this dinner. Terry Funk was at the dinner. Barry Windham was at the dinner. Bruiser Brody and Stan Hansen. And our interpreter, there was a little Japanese interpreter named JoJo, went everywhere with us because you couldn't speak any Japanese, and
Mhm.
he could communicate for you. And so JoJo was there at this dinner with us as well, and kind of a strange group, but well, it's the one dinner we had on that entire tour.
Okay, so why do you remember a dinner so well? I mean, beyond the fact that you had Dory and Terry Funk there, that's probably enough of a reason. But you're in Japan on top of that. But what stood out about the dinner with all these guys?
Well, I mean, Dory and Terry, they're always a trip, and especially Terry, and he kept things pretty lively. Obviously, Barry was very quiet. He's young at this point. He didn't really want to say too much, but Bruiser Brody and Stan Hansen's another two dudes. That's, they had
Yeah,
something to contribute as well,
yeah,
as well as Terry,
for sure.
So and the what I really remember about it, I think, is where it was in Kobe.
Hmm.
And have you ever heard of Kobe beef?
Yes, yeah, and it's supposed to be the best in the entire world.
It is, and there is no doubt about that. So of all the places in the world I would have wanted to eat dinner, that was the one that they took us to dinner to.
Wow,
It was in Kobe.
wow.
And what we had, man, well, the beef was just absolutely unbelievable. They fed these cows, man, with a special diet,
Hmm.
and they hand massaged them
Oh my God.
all day
Okay.
long.
Yeah. Okay.
They not just fed them, but then they went in there and they massaged them, man, and they didn't put them out in the pasture, and they didn't let them walk. They didn't let them do anything but just stand there and get really, really soft and
So,
perfect for eating.
so like no strong muscles inside, just soft meat.
Soft,
I
wonderful meat, man.
Wow.
The
Okay.
beef was so tender, man. And I had for the first time in my life in that meal tartare,
Okay.
which is the raw.
That right. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Wow, unbelievable. It was just unbelievable. Melt in your mouth. You just put the meat in your mouth and you didn't even have to chew it. It just go away. It was like, wow.
Holy cow.
It's just,
Okay.
so, it's quite a meal, man. A heck of a time at the meal, and it's probably, and a heck of a lot of good banter back and forth, and quite a bit of jokes, and the normal thing when you get a group of wrestlers together. So, and then the one other thing I remember about the meal was the drinking. And the reason I remember the drinking is you whatever you drank, and some guys were drinking wine, some guys were drinking normal drinks, alcoholic beverages, whatever, and they never let your glass get empty.
Hmm.
So whatever you drank, when you take a swallow out of it, they come and fill it back up.
Wow.
And
Wow.
so when you eat a meal like that, and we were probably there for 2 hours,
Right.
so everybody gets to feeling pretty darn good, man, because you're not counting those drinks. This is my third, this is my fourth. It's could have been my 15th or 20th or whatever.
Yeah.
Because they just kept filling that glass up. So there were only 8 of us eating, and it was some of the most expensive beef, obviously, and the fact that you had an unlimited amount of drinks that you drank during this meal. I remember after asking Terry after the meal was over, what it cost.
Right.
I was just curious because everything was expensive in Japan anyway.
Hmm.
So I asked Terry, and And he says, I don't know, Ron, because he wasn't picking up the tab.
Right. Yeah.
Bob was picking up the tab. So he said, but I'm going to ask Baba for you. He goes, I'll tell you tomorrow what the meal costs. So the following day, he looked me up, and he says, Ron, I know what the meal cost. I know what the meal cost. I said, how much was it? Now there's 8 of us.
Right.
It ain't the meal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
And the meal cost $3,000.
American money?
Yeah.
Whoa. Okay, that's the price of a nice, really nice used car back then. Yeah.
Yeah.
God.
1983.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good comparison.
Yeah, I think
nice
so.
Used car, man.
Yeah.
So $3,000. It was about between 300 and 400 per man. So we obviously ate a lot of beef. We had a lot of tartare. We had a lot of drinks, and we had a lot of fun too.
That's just absolutely crazy. All right, and just to remind fans, if they want the entire 3-hour story, 3 hours of the story of your tour to Japan in 1983, you can find it in Super Studcast number 6. It's titled Japan 1983. It's on your website right now at tnstud.com. That's tnstud.com. Click on Super Studcast, select number 6 Japan. All right, you're going to love it when you do. There's a lot of fun there. All right, so who is going to be next, Stud, of the NWA World Champions that you wrestled in your career? What is next?
Well, man, we're going to get to a guy that I really, really enjoyed being around. Got to know him very well in the 70s. And he became one of the greatest stars of all time, man, as a babyface. Spent a lot of his years as a heel. But, wow, once they turned him babyface, he really, really made a name for himself. We're going to be talking about the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes.
Nothing like the American Dream. Looking forward to that one.